comeback. And I thought, yeah, that's me. I like that.
I like that.
Hello and welcome to a brand new idea. This one's called Smart Casual. It's a show, radio, TV, video. I don't know what it is, but it is an opportunity to talk to, well, a really wonderful human being. Her name is Mariya. I'm going to get her to introduce herself in just a moment, because this show is about all the good things, positive hope and resilience, and how it doesn't matter how bad things get, there is always only one direction, and that is up. My name is Jason, and here is Mariya. Hello and welcome to Smart Casual.
Thank you for the warm introduction, Jason. My name's Mariya. You may have heard me about me a little bit from South Australia, branded as South Australia's most dangerous woman, and also a free speech advocate over the last 5 years. But my story goes far beyond that. So hopefully you'll get to know a little bit more about me over the coming few months and more interesting, controversial and exciting topics with you.
Brilliant. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And look, we met at the recent Free Speech Summit, of all places, on the Gold Coast. And I was the last minute MC, and I got to introduce, lots and lots of people. And by Sunday afternoon, I remember thinking, there's a lady sitting in the audience. I don't recognize who she is. And I asked someone, who is that person? They go, oh, that's Mariya. And that was the beginning. And then, of course, I didn't get to introduce you on the stage. Dave O'Neill's did that honour. But I did get to introduce the person that came on after you, one Aussie Cossack. And I do remember thinking, how am I going to make the difference here? And I thought, oh, it's kind of obvious. We're going to go from Beauty to the Beast. And it kind of got a bit of a reaction. And then Cossack was off. But it was a great speech that you gave on that day. And you told a story. And as I was watching you and watching the audience, they were truly mesmerized by the way that you told your story, and obviously the magnitude of it. No one would expect that a young lady from South Australia would spend, multiple days locked up in a prison over something that just didn't make any sense, that the punishment didn't fit the crime. And of course, this is what seems to have captured the imagination of people. But more so, Mariya, as hard as that has been, it looks like from the outside, you refuse to let anything harm you in a way that's going to turn you into a victim. And I think that was what the great appeal was, that terrible things have happened to a lot of people, but you're not letting it destroy you, if that makes sense. I know it's hurt you, I know it's harmed you, and I know it's really set you back, but you refuse, it seems, to let it take over your life. Is that an accurate observation?
Yeah, it was a really, actually, just back to the show, the event, it was a really unexpected last minute sort of attendance on my behalf, and you did a great job, Jason. I remember just laughing at some of your comments on stage, and I thought, I need to meet this guy. So I think that was the beginning of our journey. In our talk show. But yes, when everything happened to me in 2020, especially, I wasn't really able to have contact with my family and my friends for almost 2 weeks when I was in solitary confinement. And you'd think getting out of solitary confinement, of prison, essentially, you'd be overjoyed, thinking, oh my gosh, I've got my freedom back. But essentially what happened is I was put back into home prison with an ankle tracker as well, to the point where I couldn't even, leave my home to go for a run or a jog. But we did meet some really good people within the system as well along the way, as much as I don't want to promote anything that happened that was right. But there was a particular individual in correctional services, because I actually had to go in every day, well, not every day, every week, to get tested for alcohol, drugs and gunshot powder. None of the offences which I had actually allegedly had been charged for. And I remember talking to this guy and saying, have you come across anyone else with the same situation as me? And he just shook his head and he said, this is off the record, but this is disgraceful, what's happened, and I'm with you. What would you like? What do you want out of this meeting today? And I said, well, I'd actually, because it was almost around Christmas time, hadn't done any of my Christmas shopping, wasn't prepared. It was going to be quite a interesting Christmas in 2021 for me. And I said, I'd really love to go and do some shopping and to be able to take my dog for a run at least every day. And he said, you know what, we'll put that into your bail conditions and we'll grant you the ability to do that. So that brought some humanity back, into the picture, and understanding that, even though the system is extremely corrupted, fractured and broken, there are still good people within that. And ultimately, also, one thing my mum said to me was, don't be a victim, because, you can always say, oh, why did this happen to me? Why me? But, you're chosen for this journey for a reason. I'm still trying to work out what that reason is at the age of 34. But there's obviously a reason for it.
Well, our backgrounds are not dissimilar, given that we have Eastern European heritage. And I think it's kind of cool that we get to talk about our mums in such glowing terms. My mother used to say to me that you're a late bloomer. She said, I never found my dream job until I was 47. Mum was a nurse. She was a nurse from the moment that she left school, but it was when she got her job at Air Ambulance at Mascot in New South Wales that she really found her, not just her niche, but her calling. So she was a flight nurse. She was a clinical nurse specialist. She'd got herself multiple certificates while we were high school students, and she was a divorced mum, and she was determined to set herself up at that point and move on with a life. But she used to say to me very similar things. Don't be a victim. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And she would say to me, you come from good, hardy Russian stock. So we're used to this. Your grandfather escaped a Siberian concentration camp, for goodness sake. He was in there for 15 years for opposing the communists. So that's got to teach you a level of resilience. Now, I only knew my grandfather for a few years. He passed away when I was just 4. But I look at photographs and I do remember him. I still remember his smell. He smoked a pipe. It was hanging out of his mouth. He could drink a bottle of vodka like it was a bottle of water. And I remember that, and I was only 4. I mean, there's got to be more to this whole thing about what it is that we're meant to be doing and why. But we're all born for a reason. We were put on this earth at this particular time in history, at the dawning of artificial intelligence, at the beginning of the digital age, and there are many pitfalls just the same. But we're not put on here for the pursuit of unhappiness. It's the pursuit of happiness. So therefore, there is a mission statement. Even if the powers that be seem to think that there's too many of us, they don't like us, they're going to pretend that they're serving us, and we know that it's a whole lot of nonsense. So when you put all that together, it's kind of cool that that you do meet like-minded people along the way, and you can compare notes and certainly compare bruises, and realize that it's the resilience that propels you. Because the one thing about getting knocked down is you get up. And I remember reading a statement once at, of all places, at a real estate conference when I was in that business many years ago, and it said that a setback is simply a setup for a comeback. And I thought, yeah, that's me. I like that.
I like that.
It's cool, isn't it? Like, it really is, because you're always going to get beaten up. This idea that, you know, I guess it starts maybe when you play sport as a kid, and, you know, you play soccer or cricket or netball or whatever it is that you play, and you go out there every week and you play and you get good at it and you win, and you get used to winning every week, particularly if you're lucky enough to be in a good team. And I was in some of those teams that we won every week. So when I got into a team that didn't win every week, that was a real wake-up call for me, that there was more to this world. But we're all very competitive. And then, you know, we grew up. I'm certainly older than you, and I still grew up at the beginning of the video game era. And when you're playing video games, you want to win. And so you get used to winning. And then, of course, you know, the Nintendo era came out, and the PlayStation era came out. And then there was ways that you could actually cheat in video games, and they gave you cheats to do that. And so you weren't allowed to lose. Like, if you lost, there was a real problem with you. So this changes the way we see the world, right?
Yes, I can relate to that, because I've always played competitive basketball, and from a young age I actually played really competitive gymnastics. I was in the European Olympics under 10s, and I won a gold medal in Europe at the time. So
Wow.
My mum's dream was to sign me into the Russian Ballet Academy. But because the grading is so high there, you have to literally start training from the age of 2 in gymnastics and pass a certain level to be then accepted into ballet. So, it's instilled in you the torture from a young age. I remember mum would pick me up. It was 5 days a week from the age of 3 that I was doing gymnastics. And she'd pick me up and I'd just fall asleep on her shoulder on the train because it was such intense training. And then coming to Australia and realising, that elite gymnastics hardly exists, or if it does, you have to pay a lot of money. So I gave up that dream pretty quickly. And it was always my dad's dream to make a superstar out of me. So thing, and I didn't really appeal that much to tennis at the time, but I found my jam in basketball, and actually to this day still enjoy playing that. But I've taken a little bit more of a social approach now, so I play more social rather than elite level. So, but still competitive at heart, that's for sure.
Isn't that wonderful? And so to continue playing, but to realize the level of competition and what's involved, to go through the process of playing competitively, but realizing that it's more than that. There's a love for the sport. And so now you play on a more social basis and you love it just the same. Is that right?
Yeah, I love it just the same, but I still love winning.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
yeah,
I was my sport of choice was cricket. I played soccer and I played AFL when it was VFL, and rugby union and rugby league, and they were all great fun and played it all the time for fun, after school, etc. But competitively, cricket was kind of my thing. But I loved it was all the little things that built up to it. The rituals when you play sport, the smell of the leather of the cricket ball, the smell of the oil that you rubbed onto your cricket bat to prepare it for the summer, the knocking in with the ball, 1,000 hits, banging, and driving your mother crazy as you're preparing your bat. Getting the gear ready, putting the pads on, playing in the era before you had to wear helmets, playing on, pitches. Some were synthetic grass on concrete and others were turf pitches. The first time ever playing on turf, thinking, what is this? And then being taught by really good coaches the way that you would develop your skills, the style, the technique, playing off the front foot on turf versus, back foot, these crazy things that you did. Taking on, a fast bowler when you're batting and you're some short, chubby kid with glasses against some 6'2", string bean bowling at 100 kilometers an hour when you're 12, and the fear going through that, but also being able to conquer it, and those little victories and hitting a boundary and not having to run because as soon as that leather hits that wood and you get that crack in your ear and it's gone through the field and you just sit there, and it's a feeling that it's all metaphor for life, really. This conquering, the victories, the defeats. Getting out when you thought you were going to do well, and you get a crazy delivery that you just don't know what to do with, and it beats you, and you're bowled or something like that. And when you play cricket, sometimes you got to play all day. And if you open the batting on a game that runs for 8 hours, and you get out in the first over, and you got to sit there for the rest of the day before you have to stand in the hot sun and field, that's a lot of that. It's a lot of reflection time.
yeah.
It's really cool. But when you think of those gymnastic days, I'm just thinking about it, were you, when you saw some of the other kids your age when you were doing it, did you realize that you were good, but they were really good?
Look, it was quite a long time ago now, a fairly distant memory that I can only remember through looking at the photos and standing there with that big toy, that you got when you win, and the medal. But the one thing I know, I really had to work for my flexibility. So I always had a lot of physical strength. And actually, I made a record at my school in year 7, I think it was, from memory. I was able to walk 21 meters on my hands. So handstand walk 21 meters. So it was like a record that I'd set, and I was known for being this girl who was able to walk on her hands for the longest.
That's
And,
hysterical.
back in the day on the internet, it was all ingrained when you'd look up my name. Now it comes up with SA's most dangerous woman. But about 10 years ago, that was the record that was set on there. And I then went on, and actually that stayed with me for life. I can't say I can walk that far on my hands now, but I can still do a handstand and walk on my hands now. I don't really practice. So it's something that sort of stays with you for life. I then went on to perform in a circus sort of performance in my early teens, and performed at the Festival Theatre, and I was in this role called Mr. Bendix, which was obviously goes with the name, which is a bendy character. And so I was able to relive that moment again of walking on my hands. So yeah, it's a nice, sweet memory.
21 meters on your hands. That's a cricket pitch. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That has to be certainly a record. The upside down Mariya. Well, there you go. So you've never really changed then. You've been against the grain reluctantly or accidentally your whole life, one way or another.
Yeah, that's right. Not so much probably knowingly until the last 5 years. I always say that I was led quite a normal and boring life. And it was actually in 2021 that I remember sitting down and going, my life's just so bland. It would be nice to have some excitement in it. And then bam, 2 months later, and it was like I got into a car accident. And then we went not overseas, we went interstate to Northern Territory, and then obviously locked homes and then arrested. It's like, it really is true. Bad luck does come in threes.
It certainly does. And the motto there is be careful what you wish for, right?
Be careful what you wish for. Exactly. I'll never forget that.
Wow. There you go. Well, we fast forward, I suppose, to the new era where we're headed, looking forward to the future. And if you compare to the pre-COVID era, the world is almost unrecognizable in the sense of how fast it wants to move and take off. And that, I find, it's exciting, but at the same time it's frightening. And I just wonder, when you take the balance of everything that you know right now, do you look forward to the future, or do you not look forward to the future knowing what you know? How do you rationalize that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting and good topic to discuss and ponder over, because I think over the last 3 months, I don't know about you, but I think they've been heavily promoting ChatGPT and AI tools. I mean, they've been around for quite a few years now, but I don't think it's been such a hype until very recently, so it's sort of probably the last 6 months even. And it's actually really crazy how you literally don't have to use your brain anymore to do anything, even things like, how do you distinguish a good, I work in the world of HR, how do you distinguish a good candidate from a poor candidate? Because you use their application, their CV, which now ChatGPT can polish for you so well that you really don't know whether that person actually has competency to be able to write, or is it AI writing that for them? I mean, before that you used to be able to what is it called? Use Google to, research and plagiarize documents, but now it's at a very, very intelligent level where you really don't know, is it that human capability or is it adding that? So that for me is scary, because even though we can use it to our advantage, we can also, it can be used the opposite way as well. Dumbs down our society. I think the younger generation really, is really illiterate in many ways. A lot of them can't even write by hand, spell. So I always am a person who probably looks more into the future. I don't know about you. I seem to be more on the go, action driven, less focused on the past. So the future does excite me, but it is kind of unhinged, I think.
Look, it's I want to ask you about HR, and I'm going to just write myself a note to go back to it because I want to head and talk about the future a little bit too, because it's the process of HR that's always bugged me. And the reason I'll bring that up very quickly is, having applied for jobs in the past, I could never understand why I didn't get a response or only ever got a rejection email, let's say. And then I got a job working for a company called Seek Learning, which was connected to Seek, and they were selling IT courses, and that was my job. So I got a bit of an insight. And I used to talk about the filtering and stuff like that, etc. And all I thought was, I just want to get in front of some people, and I think I work better in front of people. But you got to get the interview first. So anyway, parking that for the moment. But when I think of the future, I've always been future oriented, even as a kid. I always fancied that in my lifetime I would travel to the stars, and I still believe that. Which is ridiculous. People say, "What are you talking about? You're an old man already." I go, I don't care. I just think that my future. Now, this is me, and I like the background that we're working with, that we've chosen here, because it suits my rose-colored glasses that I like to wear, and I can only see that we're not here to extinguish ourselves. We're not here to extinct our species. On the contrary, we live in a world that believes that we're still the only intelligent species that exists, and are the most intelligent species. And at the same time, we're handing over our intellectual sovereignty to a computer system called artificial intelligence without any sort of backup plan or checks and balances in that system, which frightens me to think that we're just jumping in. And it becomes political, because half the population says, well, we don't want to be like those people, and the other half says, well, we don't want to be like those people. You've got Jim Chalmers yesterday making AI out to be the big thing for productivity into the future. But I look at it and think that if you don't understand what AI is, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to replace a lot of process work that doesn't need human beings anymore. And unless those people are skilled up to do something else, they're in a lot of trouble, because there won't be work for them if they can't get new skills to do new things in a post-AI world. So that one, I park that for a moment and think about it. And then people said, oh, but if you're a creative, you're going to be okay. Well, I played a video yesterday on my news show of a guy that created an AI music indie artist. I can't remember what her name was, this girl. And then within a minute, they'd created a song lyrics, and then they'd created the song and they played it. And they were both really impressed by what had been created. And it was really good. And you're thinking, wow, if you don't have to create musicians anymore, you can just create your own music to whatever you like. The creative business is going to evaporate really quickly too. So what's going to be left? That's frightening with artificial intelligence. So what are we going to aspire to if we don't know what we're dealing with? And of course, if you think about your recent history with the whole legal challenges, imagine what could be created if you were using artificial intelligence to create great case law and great legal argument to be able to fight off that system. So the legal profession is not going to be very happy with you either when you outsmart them by using the system against it.
Well, that's funny, actually, because I think a lot of self-represented litigants like myself have caught on to AI to use it to their best advantage. And there's quite a few excellent tools that can be used, but you have to be very careful because it spits out a lot of incorrect case law as well, which is dangerous. I had a friend send me quite a lot of case law during COVID before I had won my case in 2023. And I thought, I'm just going to go and check out these cases that he had sent me. And that was like, one was about a case being won in the industrial tribunal, so I couldn't apply it. Another one was a different state, even though you can apply, different state law, it wasn't directly applicable. Another one was that the case had been won. The other one that it was lost on appeal, even though it was won initially. So like 4 of the cases out of 5 that he provided to me, I couldn't use. So you have to be very careful. But going back to self-represented litigants, which is a bit of a hot topic, it was actually on Four Corners this week. They had a huge story about it. Of course, portrayed anyone who's self-represented as a crazy sovereign citizen, which is a completely, the narrative to run with that story. But it just shows that a lot of people are actually no longer wanting to engage lawyers because they've worked out the solutions for themselves, and that even though the system is extremely corrupt, the judiciary, it's really lawless. They are bound by laws, but they don't work within those laws themselves. So we've sort of worked out that you really cannot win these cases with lawyers because they don't act in your best interest. And so there's actually workshops at the moment that chief justices are running, one that was recently done in South Australia, and it was navigating the systems of self-represented litigants, and they did a whole 2-hour workshop on this, and virtually that we're now a danger to society, and that we are using AI quite a lot, and we have to create parameters around how that should be managed in the court system, and that the self-represented litigant world is a cult, apparently, as well. It's just crazy. It's just crazy the stuff that they come up with. It's written in their own law that you have a right as a natural person to use the word person, even because we're living beings, to exercise the laws yourself. You don't have to engage an officer of the court to do that.
They will change anything in a system that disadvantages absolute control and power when a disruptor comes in, organizes, and outshines them. And that's really what's happening here. The facade is being pulled back, and you realize it because anyone who's ever walked into a courtroom, even to a local court, to defend a speeding or a parking ticket is massively intimidated. The sheriff's there, the badges, the guns, the big black belts, the police officers, the clipboards, the chill in the air, even in the middle of summer, it's always freezing cold, the dark wood, the smell inside the courtroom, all of the staff, the piled up high files. You can tell I've been into a local court a couple of times to defend myself on a few parking tickets. But that's the point, right? And I remember the very first time I once got a ticket on New Year's Day, driving to work, doing shift work back when I was working in TV home shopping. And I just happened to take my daughter to work with me on that occasion. And I got pulled up for a breath test 10 minutes from my destination on a 1-hour drive. And they jumped on me and said that your license had expired. Oh, sorry, no, my rego had expired. And it wasn't. My license had expired on the 21st of December. So I just didn't renew it. I'd been driving without this license. Well, they ordered me out of the car. They impounded the car and I had to call a taxi to get to work and get someone to drive it home. And of course, the next day, the RMS RTA was open and I just got it renewed. I think that's what it was, something as ridiculous as that. But I never got the notice in the mail, which is kind of weird back in those days. And I went to court over it because it was a $500 fine. And I defended it. Back then it was, so maybe today it's probably 3 times that. But the reason that I decided to go to court over it was this. I looked up the law and it said, if your license has expired between, say, driving without a license, so it's a fairly serious charge when you think of it. But if you've driven from 0 to 2 weeks, I think it was, something like that, or maybe it was 0 to, it was a very short period of time, the fine was $500. But if it was 1 year to 3 years, the fine was $600. And if it was, say, 3 years to life, so if you hadn't driven without a license for 30 years and you finally got pulled over like I did, the fine was $700. And I go, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to challenge it because I had made a very simple error. I wasn't notified. It was the Christmas period. I worked shift work. And there's a million mitigating circumstances here. And the fine for 1 day to 30 years is $200 difference. I don't think that's fair. And I made that point out into the courtroom and she fined me $200. And I got a $300 and I did it myself. And it was a really valid exercise to go through that process. And I was really nervous. I'd written all this stuff out and I'm sort of reading out in the courtroom. But after that, I was fine. Whenever I went back after that, once I'd gone through that process, the fear went away. I just got my facts together. I looked the magistrate in the eye and I just explained my circumstances. And from that moment on, everyone but one, I got off because it was legitimate. So I'd gone, this is over a period of 15 or 20 years. So, maybe 4 or 5 occasions. But the point was that you're not going to hire a lawyer to do that for you. You're going to work out ways to stand on your own 2 feet and to point out that this is ridiculous. I remember once working 30 years ago in a shop in Randwick in Sydney. And I couldn't find a car park. I was working in a video store, just a casual worker. And I parked on the driveway to go inside to get the key to put the car in the garage that the shop had. And the time I came back, a parking cop had walked across the road and I saw the ticket and I walked up to him and said, "Mate, what are you doing?" He goes, "I didn't write the ticket." I go, "Well, there's a ticket there and you're 3 meters away and there's no one else in the vicinity. And I went inside 12 seconds ago." "No," he said, you need to write a letter." I'm like, "But what are you booking me for? Parking on my own driveway to go get the key." And anyway, that one ended up, would you believe it? It went to the Deputy Premier, who was the Transport Minister. And I was allowed off that one as well. That's my point. And I was a 21-year-old uni student or something at the time. So dumb. But this is the point. But when it escalates and then you feel that the charge that they put on you is called serious, they look at you like you're a really evil, bad person. And this is just getting along in society today. Law and order. This is not really law. It's just the order. We don't like you parking on the driveway in a very busy street, even though your car's tiny and it's not hanging over the road. It's just not order. And so we're going to give you a ticket because you've created an offence against the state, for goodness sake. What a load of garbage. But
I know, and I think it even goes further than that. It's not about what is right and wrong. It's not about justice. It's just about the police meeting their KPIs. One of the guys that we met at a free speech event, who was a police officer, I had a candid chat with him and he said he worked in road police and he had X number of people that he had to book every single day. And if he didn't meet that quota, he would then have a performance review about why he wasn't meeting that quota. So that is how they're ingrained. It's not about, let's go actually find crimes and, stop bad things from happening. Because I don't know about you, but whenever I've called the police about something serious where I actually need their help, they don't rock up. I don't even hear from them within 12 hours or 24 hours. We had an incident at workplace where I worked in a shopping centre, called the police. 12 hours later, they rocked up, The place had already been robbed. There was no returning back. So, and that was during COVID. So, but if someone called 000 on you, like we had again in that same organisation where I worked, because apparently people were dangerous because they weren't complying with mask mandates, the police were out, within an hour. So.
Good point. Good point. I did get a fine for not wearing a mask inside a building where I was the only worker. The police officer walked past, saw me through the window, knocked on the door, spent an hour there with body cam footage and gave me a $500 fine, which we successfully defeated about 18 months later. So, yeah, there's plenty of stories. I also have another one. I don't think I've ever told this one publicly. I worked for an employer a long time ago. It's got to be 14 to 15 years at least. And I had to take him to court for not paying wages and etc. And the night before the court case, that the one of the two directors came to my home and threatened my wife that if I went to court, he would be using a weapon against me and would be basically taking my life if that was the case. We called the police. They didn't come. We had to leave the home and stay somewhere else to get to the courtroom the next day. True story. And I'll tell you the punchline. Years later, I read an article that man who came to my home was killed in a farming accident. And I mentioned that to a few people that I knew that he'd also ripped off, and they said that was no farming accident. Now, I'm being as cryptic as I can, but those facts are real. I'm not going to give too much more away. People can work it out if they want to. But that was frightening. But there was no police.
Yeah, well, that virtually another experience that I had when I was younger was with respect to an intervention order. Well, unless you can prove that someone is actually physically harming you, whether they be assaulting you, raping you, unless that happens, the police can't do anything about it. So you can't tell them, there is an offender or there is a danger. Someone is actually trying to harm me until it happens, as they say, until you are actually a victim to the event that occurs. They're not going to help.
It's odd, isn't it? Because what is self-defense at that point, and how do you preemptively defend yourself? And so there's all these crazy laws out there trying to tell you that in the moment when somebody has broken the law to enter your home in a home invasion, and somehow you're meant to not accept that statement of facts, you're meant to then make an assessment that if they choose then to harm you, you have to then find the exact same implement or less to defend yourself. Otherwise, you're the one that's created the crime in the first place, which makes no sense, because the law should be, and I'm sure it is, that if someone is committing a crime, they have no protection under the law if they're already committing a crime in progress. So whatever happens to them, all bets are off. I don't understand the self-defense argument.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they've been rewriting a lot of these laws over the last 100 years really, but more aggressively over the last 20 years. So a lot of the state laws are really quite alarming, and the penalties imposed, so many of them have 2-3 years prison terms for really petty alleged offences. So it's just a way to, force the individual to plead guilty about a crime where they actually weren't guilty. So, yeah, it's
unfair, isn't it? It's an unfair system, isn't it, when it uses different techniques, when it's meant to assess one thing, but the KPI process corrupts it, because you're then trying to negotiate or bargain for things to make results, even if it doesn't affect what's actually happened to you. And so it comes down, I guess, to people understanding their rights and defending themselves. But the other problem I have is in this space, and even little things, someone gets a seatbelt ticket and they're the driver, but the passenger's the one that's not wearing the seatbelt. The driver wears the fine there. And whilst you could potentially make an argument, they choose to pay the fine. It's kind of the same as me negotiating with terrorists. You have to have a principle at some point. And whilst it may be inconvenient, you don't just pay a fine to say, okay, I'll just pay it and get on with it. I've always had a problem with that. I don't know about you, but that one bothers me when people just say, oh yeah, I'll just pay it. Well, you're part of the problem then, because you're allowing injustice to happen because it's inconvenient.
Exactly. And that's how they get people, because like you've said, it took you 18 months to fight your matter. It took me 18 months to fight my matter to get a positive, somewhat positive outcome, not justified. And, there's still current matters before the court that I have that have been proceeding since 2021 over offences that are absolutely not, or alleged offences that are absolutely not justified. So they just want to drain you of your resources and time. So some people, a lot of people my age would just go, I don't have time to do this. I want to travel. I want to have a family. Is it worth my time? And at some point, I guess you have to draw a line and go, what is worth my time? But for me, very much, standing on the truth and what is right. And that's a line that I crossed in the sand a number of years ago now, and I just can't look back, because exactly like you said, if everyone just gives into their dirty deals, because that's essentially what they want to do. They do these pre-trial conferences where they get you to do negotiations behind the scenes without prejudice, which means it's whatever's discussed in those meetings in those hearings can't be used against you later. And it's funny, actually, because that's, you know, a key model litigant code. So for anyone who's a lawyer, they're considered a model litigant. They have to uphold that. But I actually had the prosecutor who was prosecuting my case against me use discussions that I disclosed in a pre-trial conference against me then to try and convict me at trial. And if I hadn't actually brought up and knew what I was talking about, they would have to use that as a means to convict, well, to get the court to convict me. So luckily that I brought that up and actually shamed him in front of the whole court and said, you know, you obviously don't understand even the, you know, your own bounds that you have to work within as a professional legal practitioner. It's quite alarming, you know, that you don't understand the code of conduct that you have to uphold. But yeah, I call it a dirty deal. The judge says to you, would you like to lie today to pay a lesser fee and not take to trial, essentially? Make everyone's life easier, because they don't really want to go to trial either. You know, it's easier for everyone to still get a conviction on the record, because that's ultimately what they want, still get the money out of you, even if it's a lesser amount, and get more of these cases rather than, you know, go ahead with a 3-day trial, which is what my matter was listed for. And then, you know, there is still a chance that the defendant can win, even though they bank on the fact that you lose. But in my case, obviously, I won. Because, yeah, for them, it's just easier. So I just now say it's funny, they no longer actually offer me pre-trial conferences anymore, because they know I'm going to enter into any discussions, because I openly say on the record now, I'm not entering into any of your dirty bargaining conditions. I'm not doing any dirty deals. I said the only deals I'll be making is in a public courtroom on the record, because they're all off the record, supposedly supposed to be off the record discussions that can't be used against you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question then. If we talk about using artificial intelligence to assist you in building an understanding and a defense against these, how would you feel in the future if AI had been evolved or improved and the court system was replaced with an AI judgment? How do you think that might go? The judge was an artificial intelligent computer.
No, that's an very interesting and scary topic to touch upon. Well, to be honest, not just a courtroom already. So I don't know how much worse it can get from here on. I mean, it's already very, very corrupt. But it is where we're heading, isn't it? It's sort of how far are we going to go with this AI? Is it actually going to replace these rules where you actually need consciousness? Because all these decisions, so that's the one thing that AI doesn't have, and this is what we learned, I think a lot of people learned through COVID, is the fact that you have free will and you have conscience. And that was the decision that we were all made to make, was regarding whether we want to give in our free will to keep our jobs, to be able to travel, to be able to see our dying family in hospital. You know, they held this carrot in front of us in regards to the COVID vaccinations. And a lot of people still had the free will, despite all of those pressures, to say no, despite the fact that they would lose their job, you know, not be able to see their dying mother in hospital, or, you know, not be able to travel potentially, or even pay off their mortgage. But we're still able to make that choice. Even we may have been pressured into a corner where we felt like we had no other choice but to do that. One thing AI doesn't have is it doesn't have that conscience to be able to make that decision. But I know that it is very automated now, I think, through machine learning, where they actually have been able to even work out an individual's emotions. You know, that's the next level, where they now can actually develop how you respond, what you respond to, what are your what is it called? Not deal breakers. What are those key pressing things that make you react, whether it's positively, negatively. So some positions I think are never going to be replaceable, but we can always, I guess, change the system to make it more robotic. You know, maybe in the future, the law is supposed to be black and white. That's the thing. You could easily have an AI judge determine those cases if they actually read the law and define the law within the parameters. The problem is it's so grey. It's so grey in Australia. It was never like that in Ukraine, for example, when my mum, you know, grew up. Not that she really had a lot of exposure to the legal system, but it was very black and white. So, for example, if you're going through a separation and a settlement with your former spouse, it's very, very black and white. It says, you know, this is how much you'll get and this is how much your ex-partner will get, and there's no other factors that come into play. So it's just a matter of, you know, this was your job, perhaps this currently how much income you make, this is what you contributed in terms of non-financial contributions, and this is exactly the percentage that you will get calculated based on that. It's not about how good your lawyer is, how good their argument is, how, you know, chummy that barrister is with the judge behind the scenes, because a lot of it is about that. My mum had a barrister that she had represent her who happened to be on very good terms with the mediator of a case that she was on, and she managed to get a very quick outcome of that. You know, how that's not justice. So I think if you work within the parameters of these are the only outcomes you can get if this happens, then we actually might get more justice through it. But at the moment, it's really just based on how long is a piece of string, how far are you willing to fight this, and how much money do some people have? You know, how much time can they pour into these matters? So,
I wonder if, because all court proceedings are transcripted, I wonder if these are being fed into an AI system in order to determine what the AI judgment may be in comparison to the real judgment. And I'm sure that's already going on, but that would be fascinating to see if what percentage goes the same way or goes a different way. And they must be assessing this in real time.
Well, I know someone who's been working very closely on an AI bot, and I think it's a number of platforms that they've used in the background to develop this. But essentially, often it won't tell you the truth. Like, you know, if you ask AI and you know what the answer is and you want to see whether it comes back with that answer or not. But if you actually challenge that bot and you say, you know, don't feed me that rubbish, don't tell me vaccines are safe, effective and free, because they're not, and these are the facts why they're not, and you put in those facts into the chat, it can actually start coming back with a lot of truths and actually give you all the right information. So I think it's a lot about how you train that system. What you put into it obviously is key, because you can get a very corrupted version of it being very, you know, subjective, again, to feed a narrative. But often when you give it all the facts, you'll find you'll be quite surprised to find that it actually does give you the truth in a lot of the, you know, controversial topics that we are currently discussing.
It is a fascinating tool on any sort of topic. I've happened to use Grok a few times to test it. One of the first things I actually asked it to do was to write me a bio for a particular guest, just to see what it would come up with. And I thought, well, that looks pretty good. I'll get it to write a bio about myself. And I thought it's actually better than what I would have written. And of course, some things that I didn't think were relevant, and other things that were. So you can certainly fine tune it and edit it for sure. But it was just interesting what is public knowledge that therefore that it can get access to, and maybe to test what it found that you thought, oh, I didn't even know about that about myself. Maybe that's that's interesting. I also wonder about AI and medicine because you tend to think that if you have a symptoms checker, for example, and all of your medical records are available, if you get to a point where you can almost AI self-diagnose in certain circumstances down the track, if, for example, the cost of medicine becomes too expensive, or who knows what's going on. But again, there would be researchers out there testing this to see what's really happening. And of course, anything that applies written knowledge that creates access to be able to unlock doors to other things. It's not like you can use the AI while flying a Cessna aeroplane. Like, that's not really going to happen. But you're going to have to learn how to be a pilot first. That's a little bit different. But there are many things, like kids are learning, of course, at school and at university. They get given a question. They throw the question into the AI. Write me a 2,000-word response on this question. Bang, there's your answer. But guys, you've got to read the answer and understand it if you're going to go down that pathway. Otherwise, you're not really getting smarter. You're deceiving a teacher to get a pass mark to move to the next level. You're not learning anything. That's the problem. That's the weakness in the system.
I think the other thing that is a concern is because there's going to be so much information thrown into these AI tools, it might be in the future very hard to distinguish with historical data what is actually fact and what isn't fact anymore, because so many people are no longer relying on doing their own research. They're just putting it into ChatGPT, and that's your research there. Again, we've just, discussed how much of that information, of those responses, are actually true and accurate. Well, it really depends how you formulate the questions that you ask, because rubbish in, rubbish out, virtually. So if we're going to be so heavily reliant on that, and I think a lot of us found over the last 4 years, we've lost a lot of true information. It's being removed from a lot of the search engines, where I can't, find a lot of the articles, a lot of talk shows, a lot of factual data that was available to me before has now been removed off the World Wide Web. So if they're easily able to remove those things, they're now controlling the narrative of history and essentially fact. So, in 20, 30 years' time, what is their generation going to be? The newer generation, what they're going to rely on, is it actually going to be true facts, or is it going to be what the centralized system wants you to know?
Very, very interesting times, isn't it? Like, it's the ability to reflect, have the conversation and the debate with the powers that be, that at least there is some approach that we're going to be able to walk through what we're facing at the same time, juxtaposed against this incredible rush to just bring this technology and see what happens. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, we're getting to the end of the pilot edition of Smart Casual with Jason and Mariya, and it's been terrific to sort of have this open forum chat with no real, we've got a direction where we're going, but it's just open, it's casual. It's not meant to be an interview process. It's meant to throw ideas back at each other. We mentioned at the front that we're both looking for a positive outlook on life. So I suppose as we get to the end of today, what are you looking for in your short-term life that's a positive, that you might find that someone watching this goes, yeah, I wouldn't mind a little bit of that?
I am always looking for positives in any negative situation, Jason. I think I'm a little bit like you. I like to see things through rose-coloured glasses too. But in terms of, I think, navigating the future and looking at positive outcomes rather than negative outcomes, one key take that I can perhaps suggest to people from my experiences is be in control of your situation. So whatever it is you're doing, if you can have full control of that decision-making process, and obviously getting the right support that you can find, rather than relying on someone else to, whether it be run your case for you, run your business for you, everything these days you can buy. But is it going to give you the outcome that you want? So essentially, I think taking control into your own hands and getting the support, the advice that you can find will be able to navigate, hopefully bring you the outcome that you want, or at least give you that full experience to know that you pursued that. It's like renovating your own home versus paying thousands of dollars for someone else to do that for you. Well, if you've got that money, that's great. If you don't have the time, we all understand. But it's so much more fulfilling to go through that process yourself, maybe cut your finger like I did in the first day of regrouting a bathroom, but knowing that, you've created this masterpiece yourself, or you've navigated this challenge to get this outcome. Sometimes it might not be the outcome that you want, but now you know what it is you have to do to be able to navigate that outcome in the right direction the second time.
I think that's the great masterclass of the split in modern society, is the difference between self-sufficiency and dependency. That it's a choice that you make. Some won't make it. They want to be able to blame someone else when things go wrong, and therefore depend on the system to sustain them. And there are others that say, that's just not enough for me. I want more than that. I feel like my time on earth is limited, and I feel like that I'm the only one that can get what it is that I want. How does anyone else know what I want to even know that, to let alone provide it for me? Doesn't make any sense. And so it's a lesson in so many things. I like to, sort of think, if I have the moment for free time, and gosh, it's been really busy lately, but I like the idea that I've got a pile of books next to my bed, and I'm like, which one am I going to start getting into? And I don't have to read the whole book, but I can certainly open it up and just find that something of interest. And it was just the other day, I did exactly that. And I opened up on a particular page, and it was totally relevant to a story that I was developing for my news show. And I ended up reading it into the news show. It's so cool. And I love the fact that when you have a positive mindset, somehow the universe puts things in front of you on your pathway, and you can't help but notice. That is my point. The positive mindset opens up windows and doors of opportunity that you'd never get when you're down on your luck, down on yourself, down on the system. And I think that for me is the big one. And whenever I sort of, feel a little bit down one way or another, I'm always been a bit of a comfort eater, if you will, but it's always nice to look forward to something nice. And I'm reminded there used to be I think it was the Footy Show on Sydney. Peter Sterling used to host it. And his last question was always, if you were down to your last $10, what would you buy? And I thought that was a really interesting question, because the answer was they would buy a $10, the best cigar they could buy for $10, and they would walk down the street looking up and smoking and feeling good about themselves because it was only $10. And I thought that's such an interesting perspective, because others would say, oh, look, I've got to make it, I'd buy a bag of rice and some whatever and just survive. And it's not about that, because it's how you view, and your view of the world determines everything. And I'm delighted, Mariya, that we've been able to connect and put together this nice new project, something very different in a time when the world is going mad around us. And despite it affecting us in different ways, and we haven't even scratched the surface of our life stories here, and we aim to do that over the coming weeks, because this show, this presentation is about engagement with others to find our best lives and live them out, our best ways for ourselves. And next week, I'm hoping that we're going to touch on some other topics such as meaningless connections, being alienated, what it's like to be a young person in the dating world. And if you're watching this show and you know someone that wants to come on and appear and talk, we're more than happy and open to invite those people on to have their say in this discussion. You may find this on one of our social media platforms and even on the Cafe Locked Out platform. And if you do, send us a like, a comment, a share, whatever it is, and let us know what you did like and what you want us to talk about, because this is kind of the resilience project, if you will. Maybe that's the subtitle for our show, but it's about making lemonade out of lemons. It's about dealing with the facts as they may. And as I said before, living out our best life. Mariya, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'm really looking forward already to next week.
It was great. Yeah. What an introduction to the show of Smart Casual with Jason and Mariya.
There it is. Well, thanks, Mariya. I hope you have a great weekend. And like I plan to do, I'm hoping there's no more rain left in New South Wales, because I really don't think there can be any more. But onwards and upwards. And we are not far away now from the, well, how about this? Springtime. There you go. See you all on the next show. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.